if you're an athlete who aspires to play professionally, especially abroad, you're going to want to tune into this one. Dr. Tywanna Smith is joining the show today, and I met her through LinkedIn because I saw a mutual connection that was promoting one of the things that Tywanna Smith was putting on, and I was super intrigued by it because, as you guys know, I am a huge entrepreneur and a fan of entrepreneurs. I have a massive respect for business owners who are providing value to people, utilizing their skill sets to provide value to people. So I saw that with Dr. Tywanna Smith, and today she's sharing so much insight with us. I mean, I'm telling you, take notes of the things she's sharing. She has so many different skill sets and titles. I mean, she's a readiness coach. She's a sports business manager. She's a college professor over at Memphis. She's an inspirational speaker. She's a best-selling author. She's got so much value that she's providing to athletes and professionals that you just don't want to miss. This is a great opportunity to hear from her for 45 minutes. Like, seriously, pay attention and take notes. She's going to give some insight. She was a former professional basketball player who played overseas, and she knows what happens when you play professionally overseas. There's so many components that go into it, financially, psychologically, and then the transition out of sport is also one that people need education on, and she's here providing those services to people. And you're going to hear about the Athletes Abroad Summit, which is what actually drew me to her, and the summit that they just put on in Las Vegas just a few weeks back. And she's going to give a little bit of a recap there and tell us what's to come in the future for the Athletes Abroad Summit. So again, like I said, if you are an athlete who aspires to play professionally, especially overseas, regardless of which sport, you might want to tune into this one and get ready to take some notes. There's going to be plenty of times where you're going to want to pause, rewind, re-listen to something because you're going to be like, man, that was really good. And you might even find yourself buying one of the books from her because she has a couple of books that are phenomenal. So get ready. This is a great one. This is the Gametime Guru. So,
what time is it?
Game time! Woo!
This is the Gametime Guru podcast, where I interview sports figures from all over the world to help deliver a panoramic view on sports. So whether you're a former athlete, one of the crazies, or simply a casual sports fan, this is the perfect show for you as we peel back the curtains and learn from our guests every single week. I'm your host, Shane Larson, and I'm helping you see sports through a different lens.
What's up, everybody? Welcome out to another episode of the Gametime Guru podcast. My name is Shane Larson, host of the show. Excited to have you guys here with us for another interview. It's going to be a fantastic opportunity to learn from a professional in this industry. And it's a lady that I came in contact with through LinkedIn, but it was through a mutual connection. And it's just cool how the world works and the way that things intertwine. And there's just a network of athletes and professionals within the industry. And you're going to get to know her. As you guys heard in the introduction, this is a very special opportunity. Someone who has the experience as an athlete themselves, as well as on the professional side and the business side outside of being an actual athlete. So it's going to be a great opportunity. We want to welcome on Dr. Tywanna Smith. Tywanna, thanks for joining the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. I'm excited to have a conversation with you tonight.
Oh, heck yeah. This is going to be phenomenal. So in the intro, we shared with the audience that you got many titles. I mean, you inspirational speaker, best-selling author. On your website, you listed sports business manager, athlete readiness coach, college professor. Okay, so you're an educator, you're a speaker, you're an author, you're all the things. And so it might be a little overwhelming for some people. Like, whoa, what does she do? So this is where we're going to get to know Tywanna Smith a little bit and kind of get to the point of like actually talking about the services you provide and how impactful you're making, the impact you're making in the sports industry. But let's rewind the clock, Tywanna. Let's talk to you as an athlete. Dr. Smith, before we were Dr. Smith. Let's go back in time.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your athletic career. Yeah, let's go. Well, let's go. I mean, I won't say way back. So yeah, let's talk about your athletic career.
So I basketball has been in my blood, in my family. I frequently mention, and I write about this in my book, I had a cousin who played in the NBA when I was coming up. So I come from a basketball family. I played collegiately at Ole Miss. As you know, I'm so happy so many people are now watching women's basketball. And I'm thinking like, back in my day, I would have been guarding Angel Reese, right? So yeah. But anyways, yeah, so I played collegiately at Ole Miss, and I had the privilege of being able to play professionally in Europe. I spent a year in Holland, and I spent a year in Spain as well. And all of those experiences have led me to what I've done now for the last 17 years. So, yeah, back in my day, Dr. T could go.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Ole Miss, that's not anything small, right? We're talking Ole Miss. Um,
Yeah.
when you were going to play collegiately, like, did you always have aspirations of playing collegiately before you even played professionally? Did you ever have, like, did you always have that aspiration of like, hey, I'm going to play at the next level, especially Division I level?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. And that was just the standard. My cousin played at Murray State, and our family traveled. I mean, so I'm from West Memphis, Arkansas, home to Keith Lee, Michael Cage, Sonja Tate. So we do have a rich sport history here. And yeah, that's what I saw. I mean, standing room only at their game. So there's a lot of excitement in our town around sports. So yes, I always dreamed of going to play collegiately. The WNBA sort of came into fruition once I got into high school. And so, yeah, that was a dream, right? That's where I wanted to play.
Wow, it's kind of interesting here on the front of, you mentioned the WNBA was kind of in its infancy at the time, as you were going through high school and getting into the collegiate realm, and then you went and played overseas. I do have a question on this because the WNBA is gaining a little bit more traction now. I mean, it's taken some time. I mean, it's always been there. Like since the time you were in high school, it's been there,
Yeah.
and it's been generating. It's getting bigger and bigger. But as far from a revenue generating standpoint, that's where they struggle from a business side. As far as like getting
Yeah.
eyeballs on it, I mean, it's getting more exposure now. But for the longest time, I've always been intrigued with women's basketball because it always seemed like overseas was a better option for some. And that's not all, but I know it's a better option for some in the sense of, I mean, I'm not sure if you had seen the documentary, or it was like a podcast documentary regarding Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi, I think, and they played in Russia or something. There's some crazy stuff that happened.
Yeah.
They discussed the whole concept of like how the women would go overseas and play there because that's where the sport was actually pretty big. And then they'd come
Yeah.
over here to try and like help the WNBA, but coming back over here, they're sleeping in Best Westerns. They're taking commercial
Yeah.
flights still and all that stuff. And so they were treated like royalty overseas coming over here. But what was the state of overseas basketball at the time that you were playing? What did you feel like it was like? Did you feel like there was a little more hype around it there than the WNBA at that time?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It was an amazing experience. Yes, you're paid to play a game that you love. Oftentimes, for players at that level, now I wasn't at, and Tarasi's like one of my goats all time, right? So I wasn't at her level, but you're paid nice, you're taken care of. The fan base is so insanely loyal abroad. And if you think of ever watching a football match, what we call soccer, right? It's crazy, right? And this is for men and women. It is such an insane experience, the way they support sports internationally, that you really are like a franchise player, like wherever you go. And so it was like that, when I was there. I approached it with an open mind, right? There are players who struggle, and it does depend on the country that you find yourself in, particularly now as some of the political tensions paint the way that people view Americans. And sometimes we can stand out in an area and they're like, okay, I know you're not from here, right? But being in Holland, which is a more Americanized, right? Everybody spoke English. I didn't really have a lot of language barriers and all that. It was a beautiful experience from a cultural perspective, and I was just embraced. Spain was the same. It was really nice to be able to sightsee and just experience things I otherwise wouldn't experience. So it was a great experience then. And for most players that I've spoken with and worked with, it's the same in a lot of ways, but in many ways, it's the way you approach it.
That is awesome. I think a lot of people have this perception of that overseas basketball is just like lesser than, and it's unfortunate they have that perspective because there's a lot of good hoopers, men and women, across
Yeah.
the world. And I don't know. I'm a geek of the sport. I love it all. Like, and that's why I'm like, dude, there's athletes all over the world. I think we just get kind of caught up in this box thinking that the
Yeah.
United States is the only place that has like the best athletes. Well, now like there's some great hoopers and all other athletes all across the world. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of cool to hear your perspective on it. Did you feel like the competition was pretty solid when you were playing overseas?
Um, Yes, but I will say, I think the world also views American sports as top tier, right? And I know we're talking basketball, but all sports, have a presence internationally. And I'm sure we'll probably talk more about this coming off of an event I just hosted for American athletes who play abroad. And so doing some research, I didn't realize there've been like over 10,000 players from America who played in foreign countries. And it's like, wow. But I think we all do still view the US based sports as premier, but I would say the competition was solid. It was solid.
No, that's cool to hear. And yeah, we are going to get into your event that you just wrapped up not more than like a week ago or so.
Yeah.
It was just a little over. Yeah, you had a little bit of time to relax afterwards, and we'll get into that here. That was what I was actually like. That's the way I got in contact with you, as I saw you promote that event. It was through a mutual connection. I do want to ask this question. I remember speaking with Jory Davis on my show back in 2017, 18, and she had mentioned that. So Jory had brought to our attention the fact that she played at Indiana, and she mentioned something about facilities at a Division I university compared to like going overseas. It almost seemed like it was like a downgrade in the sense of what was there. Now you were at Ole Miss. Did you feel the same way? Like the facilities at a Division I university for basketball and then playing overseas, even though it was professional, you're getting paid for it at this point. Did you feel like there was almost like a downgrade in regards to what you had available to you?
Absolutely, right. And some of this again is kind of cultural. So as you travel abroad, the way Americans view those amenities are very different than how and there are some really good situations, but just in general, you're just looking at just sort of a way of life, and I guess the importance of those types of things is not the same. However, I will say things we take for granted on this side, you see in many cultures abroad are very important, right? They slow time down. Like in Spain, they didn't wake up till like 11 a.m. Okay. I'm like, oh my gosh, why is it sleeping? So that was like an adjustment. They stay up really late. They get up really late as well compared to us. Time is money. Like we're up early and all these different things. And so I think the quality of facilities, while they weren't horrible, they didn't compare to how modern things were, right? In America, especially in a Power 5 SEC type facility, things were really nice and sleek. So yeah, it was a difference. It definitely was a difference.
Man, I think that's such a even the little things you just mentioned, like slowing down time and all that stuff. Like that's just so cool. You get to experience that. If you're playing overseas, you get to experience a whole new culture. We get caught up in the rat race here. It's just like time is money, like you said, and I think we all get caught up in it at some point. It's kind of how we're especially entrepreneurs. We're trying to like always be doing the next thing, and yeah, that's growth and it's awesome. But like, yeah, there's probably something to it too. There's probably some piece that's also about that. Like slowing down a little bit.
I had a host family in Holland. I had a host family, and we would have dinner every night. Like, I mean, no technology or anything. We're literally talking. And, I still try to implement that now, like with my children, but I just think the way of life for us is fast, like doing it on the go, or maybe you don't enjoy those moments until like a Sunday afternoon or weekend because things move so quickly in the week. But that is a staple of tradition in some of these areas. And so that part I appreciated for sure.
Oh, heck yeah. So through your professional career, I mean, you probably gained a great, amount of knowledge of how basketball works, how professional athletics work. But I want to ask, like, the transition after basketball, did you know what you were going to do, Tywanna, when you were, finished playing basketball? And how did that transition actually happen? Did you call it quits on your own terms? Was it something that was more so like, where it wasn't necessarily your choice, but now you had to make a decision? I just wanted to talk about your transition out of basketball into the next phase of your life.
That's a great question. Did I get asked often? I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. Of course, growing up around sports and being conditioned in that space, I knew I sort of wanted to stay connected. I never wanted to coach. I just don't feel like that was the gift that God gave me. And I led camps and things like that. I was like, but I do think the experience I had having an older cousin in the NBA and having a front row seat basically to not just the game, but some of the business that happens behind the scenes, I was drawn to that. So I did major in marketing in a business related field that positioned me So I was overseas playing, and during our off seasons, I would return to Ole Miss to train, and then I would also tutor and mentor some of the student athletes in the athletic department. I was approached by an alumnus of Ole Miss who remembered me being really smart and thought I would be an amazing financial advisor just for my ability to connect with people. And we had a meeting, and literally within a week, I had a job offer that surpassed what I was even making overseas. So, one thing I didn't note is that I tore my ACL in high school. So, even through college, at times I suffered with some knee issues. So, this was an easy decision for me. Like, listen, I did it, check the box. I went pro, I became an all-star. I have this job offer. Like, let's hang up the Nikes. Like, it was a very easy decision. And it was a smooth transition because I was able to move into something that I was equally good at, as basketball. And everyone doesn't get that opportunity, right? They struggle for a really long time. So I like to think, and I remember my transition being pretty smooth for the most part, where I was able to direct my competitive energy and this learning curve into another arena where I ended up becoming a financial advisor to work with athletes. So I never really left the game, right? Just kind
Oh,
of different position.
yeah, dude, that is so cool. Very unique. I mean, for athletes, it's something that's common. The last 7.5 years interviewing different athletes here on the show, like some of them, honestly, like they don't have the fairy tale ending, and some of them
Yeah.
do. Some of them have it, and some of them are unique, like yourself. Like it wasn't necessarily your call, but you had an opportunity that presented itself, and it was actually the best case scenario for you. So it's always interesting. Like athletics is one of those weird things. Like very rarely do you get to like right off into the sunset on your own terms, playing at the best that you've ever had. And like, it just doesn't happen that often. It's the
Right.
reality of it. It's kind of brutal. It's a brutal reality. But for you, it
For
seemed like
sure.
the transition was decent, right? And so,
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And I would like to think that tearing my ACL at an early age sort of made it a real reality to me that, you know what, the game could be, I mean, like a season ending injury, it could be gone just like that. And I think from that point forward, after my junior year in high school, I sort of changed my perception of the level of importance of the game in my life plan. While I still had aspirations to play professionally, I became this overachiever in other areas of my life. You know, academically, I'm sitting at the front of the classroom. I was always a straight A student, but I was really like, I took the ACT, and on my first try, I made like a 24, 25. I took it 3 more times until I made it 31. Everyone's like, why are you taking, first of all, you have a scholarship already. So like, why are you even going? But that's kind of how I shifted the focus of my competitive energy, right? So I wasn't so consumed with sports. And I think more than anything, that's what draws me to wanting to help athletes today, right? Because you can see, I mean, the game has an expiration date. You can't play forever. But we see more and more players just kind of, like you say, going to that sunset, you know, unprepared. And it really is a tough transition.
wow.
Yeah.
Like, and I love that you had that perspective. It's unfortunate when you deal with injuries, but sometimes I think that I believe there's a reason for everything. I think that
Yeah.
there's divine intervention for everything. And even if you have to like, go through some trials and you look back at it, you're like, you know what, that was actually giving me some perspective, which guided me
Right.
here, which is now helping me with athletes at this point. So I think that's pretty cool. So you mentioned financial advisor for athletes. That is such
Yeah.
a like having the financial background like to help athletes with the financial component. I was drawn to that when I was chatting with you a couple weeks back when we were just on a call, and one of the things that I've always been interested in is financials with athletes. Like just not necessarily knowing their paycheck, but understanding the concept. Like people, including myself back in the day before I watched the 30 for 30 documentary from ESPN called Broke, and it talked about all these athletes going broke and how could they ever do that? Like everyone thought millionaires, how do you ever lose your money? But you start to realize the
Very.
little things. It's no, that's and then
Yeah.
honestly, there's because it's not just like okay, spending habits is one thing, but sometimes they're misinformed. Sometimes they don't even have the basic knowledge that you would
Yeah.
expect to have. Like I remember them talking about like I think Cam Newton discussed like he had never cashed a check before because he wasn't allowed to work
Yeah.
in high school. He wasn't allowed to work when he was on a full ride scholarship. So he never actually cashed a check himself. Then he gets this multi-million-dollar signing bonus. Like little things like that.
Yeah.
And that happens to a lot of athletes. They don't know what to do with this money, who's getting paid what, insurance agents versus financial advisors versus
Yeah.
CPAs, like all sorts like yeah. So my question is, what is your favorite part about being like involved with the financial component for these athletes? Is it, and what is one of the biggest struggles you see with athletes when it comes to managing their money?
Yeah. Um, so I get the most fulfillment from seeing the light bulb come on to where these young adults, right? Because I try to humanize their experience. Just because they're millionaires or 100,000aires, okay? They're still human. They're still very young in many ways, and they've been conditioned to have people make decisions for them, from coaches on down, right? For a very long time. So when they have to make sound decisions, which is a skill that you practice, they don't do so well. So to see the light bulb come on where they feel empowered to make some of these basic life decisions, to some, right? A big deal to someone who has never had to do them for themselves. I get the most fulfillment from that, from making them independent thinkers around business and financial literacy. Um, One of the things that I think is the hardest thing to really break through with them is to break old habits, thought processes, and expectations for the experience, right? We see sports so glamorized, this side of things, right? When you see an athlete, they have a look. There's certain things they have on. There's certain places that they frequent. There's certain things they do in their communities. And so what you find is these players glamorizing that before they even get there, where they then become like characters. You're just basically playing because this is what they're supposed to do, right? Like you're on autopilot, rather than learning about the principles where you're truly making a decision and not just sort of playing dress up, right? So I mean, it became like clockwork when I first got into business and I started to prospect these players and their families and try to really connect with them prior to and earn their trust. The behavioral side, the psychological side, right, was the same. It's like, okay, I'm gonna get a car, let me get some jewelry, I'm gonna go shopping. And I'm like, kid, wait, hold up. You hadn't even gotten a check. Like, what are you doing? And then when you get the check, you've already spent and you owe someone who is really feeding the habit. Okay. So, I talk a lot about that system that goes on within sports that we don't talk about, right? And there's some agents involved in that as well, where you're fronting these young adults money to be reckless, and then they got to pay you back, and they don't know that they have to pay you back, right? And so that was kind of one of the first things that I encountered, that I'm like, oh, wait a minute, whoa, what are you doing? Like, oh, my agent is giving that to me, right? And then you get your first paycheck and you already have your first bill, and now you're waiting on your second paycheck, and before you know it, you've accumulated this lifestyle where you're 40 grand a month just to exist, taking care of you and so many people, and you're basically paycheck to paycheck, right? So I think breaking those thought processes, to answer your question, is the hardest part about working in this space with young athletes who, now we have NIL, you have even more pressure for them creating bad habits with the money that is harder to break. So just kind of the psychological part is the hardest.
It's all of that is so cool to me to like hear it from your perspective. And it's not, I don't mean cool and like, being so happy that these people struggle with this, but
Right.
it's so insightful. And I hope athletes take note of that. I hope the people who are listening to this, who are aspiring, even like you said, even at the high school age now, they can monetize off their name, image, and likeness. And so
Yeah.
to a smaller capacity, they might run into that. Like, honestly, Tawanna, I was at a basketball tournament here in Idaho. We had a
Mhm.
kid from California that traveled up for this Christmas basketball tournament they were hosting here.
Yeah.
And I remember them saying, oh, this cat's got 7 figures in his bank account already, and he's 18
Yeah.
years old, and he's going to be going to the NBA in a year. And I was talking to the kid. He's super, super cool. But I started thinking to myself, I'm like, man, that kid has more than most of these adults that are here watching
Yeah.
this, and he has no clue what like he's about to get into. Like, hopefully he does. Hopefully he has someone like yourself there guiding him. But that's scary when you really think about it from an adult's perspective. You're like, it's a
Yeah.
lot of money to be handing out, and that just causes
That
some
is.
potential for more problems, right? Like it's scary.
Right. Particularly because that type of income is oftentimes not sustainable, right? You'll have a few who make some good decisions and they're able to utilize their skills in a different way to keep a high level of, income coming in. But for the vast majority of athletes, they have that earning potential over a very short period of time. And because you have so many handlers, people making decisions for you, you don't ever truly learn how to do this yourself or recreate this income off of something other than being able to play, which we all know one day will end. I mean, Mother Nature is undefeated. Okay. So it's it's concerning to me, right, that we don't see the same attention to the educational side, and not just for the athlete. All right. So I had this conversation recently as well, at our event. The families go through this process as well, and they're extremely influential on the decision making of the particular athlete. Mom, dad, if they don't have a strong, financial literacy or educational background, which in many cases that's, the storyline, um, they're influential. So they're, guilt tripping you to do things that you shouldn't do. You may have people telling you the right things to do, but then you've got siblings, right, who maybe now they no longer want to work because they're just going to hang out with you, right? Now you're having children. Maybe you have cousins, and all of these people are influencing you, not just to do things for them, but to do things for others, right? Before you know it, this is what I'm saying about the cash flow, because it's like a perfect storm of things happening, right? At some point, your career is going to end. Maybe you've only played ball with whatever sport, and you haven't really developed another income stream, another skill that's not sport related. Okay. You've amassed this very expensive monthly lifestyle that before you know it, now you're struggling to make these payments. Now you got to start telling people no, but you want to save face because you don't want people to think that you're broke, right? This is the psychological side, right? So now you're trying to figure out, you're continuing to dump money into something, then your homes are in foreclosure, and it just sort of this trickle effect, when all of that can be avoided if you go in with the proper expectation that starts with learning and development. Right. And so I've created programming for that at the high school level to expose them, right, to this information around, and I really call it business literacy, right? Because there are business decisions that affect the money. It's not just the personal finance side. But we just got to do a better job of teaching these kids and their families what to do with this opportunity before it gets there, right? Because when they're in it, it's way too noisy for them to listen to sound advice.
Now, is this like thing that you put together? Is this the Teen Money Box? Is that what?
No, that's another program. So Teen Money Box is the business and financial literacy curriculum we created in COVID. So some of my friends, colleagues, and I, CPAs, HR executives, on some of the things that teenagers need to know that we can administer through the schools and community organizations about money. And so it's very community collaborative based, where we're bringing in bankers, real estate agents to help these kids open accounts, practice using money while you are under the protection of your parents, but also to learn about some like investing principles around stock market investing, real estate. The kids usually love the real estate one, entrepreneurship, and all of these life enriching things so they can get off to a better start in their young adult lives. And we have several, dozens of community partnerships that we've been able to administer that summer programming. The other program is Pro Ready, and it's short for professional ready. And this is where we meet the student athletes in high school, and we teach them NIL, right? Because you hear a lot of things on social media without fact checking, right? So NIL, the recruitment process, how to choose, colleges, if that's even for you, right? Trade school, what have you, but also how to find money to go to school, right? If you think about where many of the players who go on to play at the highest level come from, it's from these at-risk communities. Okay. So I want you to think of the resources, the education quality is typically not there. So we wanted to create a resource where they're exposed to this information sooner in hopes of helping them prepare to make those decisions down the road.
Man, this is so cool. You're a true like entrepreneur. This is like when we talked about what you have done. I mean, we haven't even gotten into your books yet, but like we talk about what you've done. Obviously, you have the experience, the athlete, and we talk about financial, and you've got these courses and you've got these resources available. I think it's incredible. I come from the entrepreneurial space to my corporate setting. Like I tell everybody right now, at this point in my life, I'm a director of marketing at a company. But before that, I was working for a company called ClickFunnels, and I was around the entrepreneurial space for
ClickFunnels for a while.
Oh yeah. See, I used to run a thing called the One Funnel Away Challenge with ClickFunnels. So I was the one who ran the whole program for the last 6.5 years up until 3 months ago. And so, I mean, I was working with Russell Brunson. He's my friend. He lives down the street, and I love Russell. But being around the space for so long, I have such a massive respect for people like yourself who have a skill set, and you're sharing that and helping others with it, right? And it's super cool to me. That's why I geek out about this kind of stuff. I'm like, this is incredible what you have, and you're hitting all different realms, and it's necessary stuff. Now, Tywanna, you talked about a couple of things as we were discussing, like the athlete's lifespan. You said how, there's an expiration date. Well, I was looking at your books when I was checking out your website and whatnot. I'd love to have you given, opportunity to chat about your books. I've seen Surviving the Lights. I've seen Plan
Yeah.
2. I want to see a little bit more about these books so I can share that with the audience as well. Again, everyone who's listening, I have the link here in the description for TywannaSmith.com. This is all of this information she's sharing right here is on the website. There's the book, Plan 2. So if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about these. Oh, and Surviving the Lights. Here we go.
Yes. So this was my first book. Again, having been in the business now over 17 years, I wrote that a few years ago for the reason of trying to reach the younger, aspiring pro bound athlete, right? The kid who has dreams of going there. And what I did was I created a chapter book with all of the things that come with being a pro, right? When I talk about surviving the lights, we hear all the stories about athletes who struggle. They go broke. They're having a mental health crisis post-career and all these different things. How do we avoid that? How do we help more of them survive what I call the lights when the lights are on? And it's by preparing them to be, ultimate professionals in everything. And so here are some things we don't talk about that aren't necessarily sport related, but they accompany the game. Whether it's the way you take care of your body, how you create a legacy in the community. How do you choose agents and the people to represent you? How do you deal with your family members and people of the opposite sex? How are you supposed to be proactive with your mental health? And so I use this in my programming at the high school level to encourage these young people to start carrying themselves that way right now, right? Because that is a part of what being a pro athlete is all about. Well, after and it was successful. It became a bestseller. So I was really geeked to see so many people looking for some guidance. However, I then sort of turned my attention to people like myself who find themselves in a support position, whether this is a counselor, advisor, whether this is an agent even, or someone who wants to get in the business working with athletes. And so that's where Plan 2 came into play. And so what I wanted to do was create a manual for the people around athletes to teach them how to first understand, right? I keep going back to the psychological part of this, which was a part of my research. You have to understand the way that they think in order to reach them and meet them where they are to disrupt that. It's really hard to, replace something with a new habit without disrupting those thought processes. And so Plan 2, the premise is, when we talk about life after the game or what is your plan B? It teaches our student athletes and our athletes that I've got time. This is after the game. Like once I get a little closer to the end, when we never know when the end is, right? Then I'll think about those things. And so the idea is teach them how to create empires right now, how to build their brands right now. Once I released that book, right, we started talking NIL. So I was very happy about that. Like, hey, now it's cool to talk about it in college and even in high school because we're having those NIL conversations around monetizing certain things around their brand. So this book offers a 3-step process on how the people around athletes, whether you're a mentor or whatever, how can you support your athlete to prepare for their life beyond the game?
This is incredible. You can find those on Amazon. To my understanding, that's where it was linked on the website, and so we'll put those here on the description of this podcast as well. I'm going to get myself a couple copies, so I'm excited about that. I always love reading, and the fact that you are in this space and you have written, but this is so cool to me. So I'm definitely going to get some. But I would encourage those who are listening to check that out as well. I mean, this is so beneficial for so many people, even the parents of these athletes. If you're a parent, please take some proactive measures. You're learning about this right now with Dr. Smith, and this is an opportunity for you guys to also get this in front of your kids who might be athletes and have these aspirations, and it educates you too. I think something that you pointed out earlier was so vital. A lot of the times the parents need to be educated. A lot of times it's not always that, it was dad was an NFL player, so mom and dad understand all the financial components of it. A lot of the times it's the exact opposite, where they didn't really, middle-class family maybe that, boy or girl happens to make it big and makes some money, and all of a sudden they're the ones giving the advice, but they've never actually had to handle that much money either. And so it gets fishy. Like you said, I think it's a great opportunity for everyone to become educated with the resources that you're providing. So I think that's what I would recommend. Now, Tawanna, one of the things I wanted to make sure we touch base on was your summit, the
Yeah.
Athletes Abroad Summit. I wanted to touch base on that. You alluded to it earlier. You know, it's a summit you put on for athletes that play overseas and play abroad, and we want to get, one, just a little education on what it's like. Two, how did it go? And three, do we plan on having another one?
Yes, yes, yes. So this event was a second effort by one of my clients and I, Sunny Weems, who we put this on together. A couple of years ago, we filmed an international sport documentary entitled Ballin' Abroad, which I hope will come out the end of this year, the last quarter of this year. So there'll be more details about that, where we chronicle the lives of 5 American athletes who found themselves playing abroad, and they all happen to be in China. And so we wanted to give people a look into their lives, again, to humanize them, but also to share what is it like to be this top athlete overseas. And so we wanted to come together, and I'm thinking, like, you know what, we should create an educational piece, because that's what I do. You know, I also teach at the University of Memphis. And so all the things I live and help athletes go through, I try to teach younger athletes so that they're better prepared when they get to this level. And that's where my books and programming come in. So he said, let's do it. Like, cool. So we came up with this concept to create this Athletes Abroad Summit, where it's a co-ed experience for male and female athletes who are American, but find themselves playing in a country outside of the United States. And this spans all sport. I think it's a heavy basketball focus because of both of our backgrounds. He is a former NBA player, EuroLeague champion, 3-time Chinese basketball champion. He's still playing in China. So he has a very expansive career. And you can imagine some of the things you go through playing in the Russias and the Israels and Lithuanias of the world. But the experience went amazing. All right. So we had support from UFC, which is such a huge enterprise. It's insane. The NBA Players Association, they were supportive and they attended. We had NBA players there. It was just amazing. Many thought leaders in the sports space around career transition, IP protections, and mental health. It was a one-day event this year. It will be back next year in an expanded form just by popular demand. And so it's been amazing. I'm still receiving great feedback by how smoothly everything ran, but how impactful the conversations were. One unique feature of the event was to have a player panel of male and female athletes, both current and retired. There were retired WNBA players on the panel, sharing their experiences of the challenges of living abroad, culture shock, different food, different time zones from your families, and just the isolation that oftentimes comes with living abroad. But then also the high points, right? You can get paid very well. The fan base is insane that you can monetize some things on a global level, right? But even the experience of just living in another country and visiting things you probably read about in books, like it's insane. So it was such an empowering experience. We will be back next year during NBA Summer League to run it back all over again. And we're just looking forward to continuing to make an impact with this segment of the athlete community, because nothing exists like this. So we were happy to pull off this first ever experience and to provide support for those who play outside the United States.
That is so cool. I would love next year to help in some capacity, whether that's just promoting it and sharing it a little bit more about it.
Yeah.
But I think it's so cool that you have that. That's what like drew me to it. I saw this post and I'm like, man, this is super cool. And then hearing that now makes me so happy to hear that, you know, it went well
It was
and
great.
well received. Oh, that's so,
Yeah, like we
so
were
good.
like pulling chairs out of the back, like, okay, more people are coming. Like, oh my gosh, like it was so amazing. UNLV was our host, and they have amazing space. And of course, as you know, NBA Summer League happens on their campus in the Thomas and Mack. So it's just really great to be in such an area with so much great, innovative sport energy happening. And we were able to pull off a very successful event.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's what I'm talking about. Well, then, is there a website that we can maybe direct listeners to at least get more information when the next year runs around? Or like if there's, like, I know there's social media that I can put down here, but what about a website?
Yeah, you can find more information because we're actually going to open up and share some blog posts from our contributors and our speakers, because they share some amazing information that all of us can use. But you can visit athletesabroadsummit.com and you'll find all the information. Athletesabroadsummit.com.
Perfect. Yep. Got it right here. I'll make sure to link that as well. We've got a couple different links here. I want you guys to remember that Tywanna's website, tywannasmith.com, is also in here. That's where I have her books. Well, I don't have them. She has her books there, but that's where I had, found them myself. And all the other resources she's talked about there. But then athletesabroadsummit.com is for this summit specifically, where you can find out more information. She'll be posting the blog stuff there too. And then for next year, you'll probably be able to catch that too. I'm super excited for that. That makes me really happy to hear that. I really think that there's a need for that. And that's what's so cool, that you are so innovative with what you're doing. You're utilizing all of your skills to provide value. It's not just to have this fluff. It's
Right.
value that you're providing to the industry. I want to ask you this, Tawana. I'm sure like you're providing all this value. I want to know though, for you, like, what was the biggest life lesson that sports up into this point, what's the biggest life lesson that sports have taught you?
That I would say that it moves the needle for all of us, right? It's one of those unifying forces. You can be seated next to someone in a sports event that you like, different nationalities, like you couldn't be more different. Yet through that experience, you are suddenly, find a way to connect. And I think that is so impactful, particularly in this day and age where we find things to divide us. I really appreciate the connecting power of sport and how it's able to elevate all of us, no matter where you are around the world. I think that's what's most special to me.
Yeah, I knew we were supposed to be friends. I always said, sports bring everybody together. In some ways, if you're an opposing fan, depending on how
Right.
fanatical it can be a little different. But it's true to that same. I mean, for like 3 hours at a football game, I don't know if I might not ever see this person again, but we're high fiving, and
right, we are right.
we're good right now. So I think it's so cool. You just said that it's a unifying component. Like, we don't have a lot of that in the world at the moment, and it's cool that sports can actually be an avenue for that. So cool. And if you were to give one piece, without giving away the house, because you have services that you provide and people need to pay for, but like without giving away the house, what would you say is like the first step if somebody's interested in playing basketball overseas? I've got friends of mine who are still playing overseas, and the ones who are looking to play overseas, kids that I coached in high school that are getting done with their college careers, and they're trying to see if they can have a profession overseas. What would you say is just the first step? You don't have to give any other information, but what would be the first step for these athletes who are like looking to go over there?
Definitely find a mentor, preferably someone who has played overseas or who is in the business. Okay. Not someone you hire, someone who has a vested interest, who can provide you objective counsel, right? And it could be a family member, friend, that, because you'll be faced with so many other decisions. You need to have someone that can help you with that process. I'm a huge proponent of mentorship, right? I have several, okay, and I share this all the time in several facets. And when I go in to speak to young people through our programming, I always ask that. And surprisingly, many of them are like, no. So like they're going through these processes on their own. And again, their families don't often have a lot of insight. Find some type of mentor in this game, in this business, who can help you evaluate the people, because it's a lot of people who say they can do things for you and they can't, or they don't, and you don't even know how to look up to see they're not legit. Okay. So find a mentor in the space, someone preferably who has played overseas, who can give you answers to questions you don't even know to ask.
Oh, I love it. I'll for those who are listening to this one, if you remember, a couple of people I've had on my show that could probably fall into that category, who have offered up like being willing to help. I had Jory Davis on the show. Obviously, Tywanna Smith here, but I had Jory Davis. I had Rebecca Harris. I had a man named Sean McCaw, who played over in Germany. Who's actually still overseas. Tyron Johnson is overseas playing right now. I have a buddy named Reggie Larry who played for a long time. He finished up his professional career a couple of years back, about 2 years ago. But he played for 10 years. These are people that have been on the show that I'd recommend at least following for the most part. And then like, if you're able to reach out to, I know that the others that I mentioned had, referenced, hey, if anyone has questions, follow me. And if it's
same, I do that a lot. People, DM me a lot with questions, or, on LinkedIn, please reach out to me any way that I can help or connect you with someone who can help you in a particular area. I do have a pretty nice network of people who feel the same way. They're just willing to help. Let me know.
Yeah, I love that. Just utilize utilize the network. This is what I think is cool about this podcast platform is I met people like yourself, and you never know who knows who. And,
Right.
so, yeah, sometimes you might have to pay for it, but like if just connect with people and build authentic relationships. And that's all we can ask. So I appreciate the insight, Tywanna, and I'm looking forward to, following your journey and just seeing what else you put together. Obviously the Athletes Abroad Summit for next year too. I'm really excited for that. But one last question. What do we expect to see from you in the next 12 months? It seems like you're innovating. So like you're teaching at University of Memphis, like you said, like you got all these things. Do you have any other things in the crock pot, so to speak?
Yeah. So as I'm scaling my programming more, one thing that is of particular interest to me moving forward is to ensure that I am grooming more professionals in this space. I have taken an unorthodox route to where I am. I didn't necessarily work with a team or league or anything. I went the entrepreneurial route to this management firm I've created, and that opportunity exists, right? So I want to be able to bring along more young managers, right? Business managers to support this explosion that we see in sport on the men and women's side, right? And, allow them to build their own platforms and really advance the game.
So cool. Yeah, no doubt you're going to do that too. Like it's so cool. I'm learning a ton from you. Just in the last 45 minutes, it was amazing. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you do and how you continue to scale this out and develop all these professionals. This is going to be so cool. So Dr. Smith, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for joining the show, being willing to take your time to do this. And for those who are listening, I hope you guys enjoyed as well. All I ask you guys is if you're watching this on YouTube, it's my smallest platform. My audio podcast is huge. It's been out into 182 countries, all 50 states, but the YouTube side's tiny. I consider, just giving it a follow. So hit the subscribe button if you want to be watching this on the YouTube channel. It helps me out if you just hit the follow button. It's free. So help me out by following me over there. And you know what? We'll be coming to you guys next week with another interview. So take care.
Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of my show. Now, if you could go and do me a favor, head over to iTunes, give me 5 stars, and leave me a review. It would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your support.